just put you in the chat so that I am sure that we're together. Okay, so that's from Anita. Thank you very much. Yeah, so Ella, maybe you can handle the admitting people into the session. All right, so we already had a session in the past where we had someone teach us some basics about REST API. We'll talk about that as well, and we'll try as much as possible to see how we can dive into using JavaScript in conjunction with Node and a bunch of frameworks in the future. We'll be focusing on Express though, but we'll look at how we can mix these things together to build RESTful endpoints or RESTful APIs very soon. So for today, let's basically talk about classes. So some of the things we are going to be looking at, and I would write them I'll write them here. So some of the things we're going to be looking at with regards to classes, we're going to understand what a class is and how to use or create a class in JavaScript. So classes, a JavaScript class. Okay, we would also understand inheritance. We'd work with static methods. Would cover static properties. Work with private fields and yeah, private methods. Okay, so these are some of the things we're going to cover. I think maybe I should also include the getters and setters. And I'm sure you might have heard about these things, but maybe you have not worked with them, right? So in the past, we've talked about, we've covered the JavaScript objects. We use JavaScript objects. So this time around, would go the other way to use classes and to create child classes and parent classes. That's where inheritance comes in. One of the major benefits of working with classes, and I'm sure you must have heard of object-oriented programming. So we're going to practice and work with object-oriented programming, which is basically also referred to as OOP, right? So that's what we're going to be doing in this session. When we're done with this, I'll try as much as possible to go through this in a very simple way so that you can understand some of the basic concepts. If you have any question, or if there's something you want to know that I probably forget to touch on, or maybe I don't touch on that particular thing, feel free to ask your questions in the chat and then I will answer that, right? Okay, so basically let's start already. So if you are asked, right, what is a class? A class is applicable in a bunch of languages that support the object-oriented style or paradigm. Is basically called paradigm, but I would most times call it style, or approach, because of the level of experience that some of us have, on this call. Instead of diving deep into explaining, what paradigm is, or in the context of programming, we'll just call it style. So a programming style where you treat everything as objects, right? So a programming style where you treat everything as objects. You can create a user, you can create an employee, you can create basically any object, and you treat them as objects by appending what we call methods. And method is basically talking about, okay, what can this object do? So a quick example, and that's why I have this tool opened up, so I can show you. Yeah, we'll just do some basic diagramming here. So let's assume we have a user. So I'm going to search for user. All right. So let's say we have this user, and this is an employee. This is an employee in our organization. We have this. Come on. All right. We have an employee, and the employee is expected to be able to perform some kind of operations, right? We should be able to probably download items while working in the company. Maybe there are some bunch of items that you want the employees to be able to download. You want the employees to be able to do work, right? Let's just call this do work. You want the employee to be able to also probably yeah, I don't want to say get paid. Instead, I want to say pay tax. I think that makes sense. Because you have to make sure that your modeling, which is basically what we're doing, makes at least a little sense. So this is an example, right? But an example of when you can use, a class, you can say, okay, I have a user should be able to sign in, create accounts, stuff like that. We're trying to model this user and put in those activities as what we call methods. A method is basically a function that you write inside a class. So anything you write inside a class, which is in this case an object, anything that you write inside the class or in JavaScript within an object is referred to as a method. So something that we have tried in the previous sessions, we usually have things like function. Okay, let me do this in VS Code. And I believe most of us are actually going to be using VS Code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder on my desktop. So let's create a folder. And we're still trying to explain the meaning of classes. So let me zoom in on this. I would just go down to my desktop, make directory. I'll call this class or JS class. So let's open JS class. I'm going to create a file, index.js. Okay, so let's open this with VS Code. Okay, let me zoom in as well. Increase the size. Okay. Let's increase the size again. All right, so let me know. Can you see the size? Can you see this? How many of you can see this very well? Let me know in the chat. Okay, so yeah, let me know in the chat if you can see my. Okay, good. All right, so this size is good enough. Okay, so yeah, so basically, we have done things like this while working with objects. So we have like let's say user, and we have username and password. Just for example, and then you have things like this dot username equals username, and you have this dot password equals password. And then we can also put in a function where we say login. For example, we have done something like this, and then we have return. Yeah, this admitting is actually disturbing my screen. Okay, so we have let's just say we have this.login, and this is basically, of course, you can work with your arrow functions. Always remember that. But why am I putting this here? I would explain that to you. And I also said you can even call like the user.this and the user.login. Basically, what we're trying to achieve here is to say this is yeah, let's say return login successfully, right? So this is a login, and I'm going to call this a function. Is that correct? Or I'm making a mistake somewhere? I can't. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So I'm going to create like let's say mav. Let mav equals probably new user, and I'll say mav with the password of mav. Just an example. So let's say mav.login, and I'm going to console.log this, right? So let's run this. I believe most of you understand what I'm doing here. There's nothing complex about this because we've done this in the previous class, right? Yeah, so I'm going to just run a node index, and of course we have a problem, and the problem is this is not a function. So I'm probably making a mistake here. This is the old way of writing this, and I'm sure where am I making that mistake? All right, so give me a second. Let me quickly or you can let me know in the chat. So I think Bendex will probably discuss this the other time, and definitely I am making a mistake here. Okay. I want to be sure. Okay, function login. Okay, let's see if that works. Map.login. All right, so this is absolutely wrong. So let me go ahead and fix this. So from the previous class, we have something here. CD JavaScript. Am I correct? All right. So I have objects. So CD objects, and I'm going to simply check cat constructor function. Okay, so yes, this dot greet equals obviously. So this is what I should have, and I think there should be this dot login. I should have equals function. Okay, so let's run this again, and we have logged in successfully. Okay, good. So this is basically. Oh yeah, thank you. That was from Precious. The class is being recorded. Okay, yeah, the class is being recorded. Okay, so this is basically the way we work with objects, of course. This is basically called a constructor function, right? So we are basically creating creating an object and also appending the methods using this format. But there's a better way to do this, right? You can see even Visual Studio Code is telling us that this constructor function will be converted into a class declaration. And the class itself in JavaScript is also referred to as a syntactic sugar that makes the entire structure of whatever it is we've done so far to look better than what we have right now. So you see, I was able to click on the suggestion, and it was able to convert this into a class automatically. And what we should now check is, okay, can this still work the way it's working? Well, yes, it's still working, but it's most times better when we take the login option away from the constructor, right? But the idea here is you are seeing that we're able to easily convert a constructor function into a class. Why are we working with classes? Now, basically, you don't want to end up having, let's say, having a bunch of functions, when working with constructor functions this way, you can do things like this. So let me explain. You can do things like this. You can extend the functionality, and of course, this is done because we're working with the prototype, and this is something we'll talk about in another class. But you are able to extend the prototype, and you can even extend from a prototype of a different constructor function. You can actually extend. You can attach the functional. You can extend the functionality of this function by adding these methods. Just by calling it this way, user.prototype, just like this, right? Yeah, so you can do things like this, and decide to work with let's see, logout. So I'm going to change this to logouts, and we're not using a class now. We're still talking about the constructor function, right? So let's say map.logout. Let's run this. So you see logout. Okay, that is yeah, log out successfully. And yeah, so the idea is we are working with constructor function, and now we are talking about migrating from writing code this way to working with classes, right? All right, so I'm going to call this constructor function. Okay, then let's talk about classes. Let's call this class 5.js. So that it won't really please, whoever is in charge of admitting people, can you remove me from that functionality? It's disturbing my screen, please. Just allow me share my screen, and yeah, and that'll be fine. Okay, all right. So let's talk about classes now. The idea, okay.
Map, you have to share your screen.
Okay, you have to give me permission to do that. Give me permission to share my screen if you, yeah.
Okay, you can go ahead.
All right, thank you. Okay. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now. All right, so back to what I was doing in VS Code. Right now, we're going to do something similar, but this time we're going to use a class. Now, the idea of working with a class, is basically because it has a better interface. When you're looking at it, you are able to really follow through and understand what you have within the class. And of course, you can also create your constructor, which is basically a function to initialize a new instance or a new object out of that class, right? So you have the class itself, which is kind of like a blueprint. We're going to call that a blueprint. So looking at this right now, I'm going to call this employee blueprint. Now, what do I mean by blueprint? So this is kind of like a template that, we'll be able to create a lot of employees from, right? So I'm going to create a new employee right now. And this employee, I'm going to call this employee John Doe. And, John Doe is going to be created, from this, from our blueprint right here. So John Doe is going to be a new employee blueprint, right? Or a new employee, if you call it, if you can, if you can call it that. And if John Doe is a new employee, it means John Doe automatically has, the ability to perform some of these, functionalities that we have here, such as doing the work, paying tax, and also downloading the items, right? And that is the idea of working with a class. You don't need to always create, new objects, to do something like that. There are a bunch of other features, when we start working with talking about getters and setters, and you'll see, working with private fields, working with public fields. So we'll talk about that. Let's go ahead and try to model what we have here. We have the employee blueprint that is able to do this. Then we'll create a new instance of that, which is John, and who is going to be a new employee, right? A new employee, and as a new employee, you should be able to perform this operation. So let's work with a class and let's quickly implement that. All right, so we're going to call this class employee, right? You can also call it blueprint if you want to, but let's just leave it as employee. And this is basically the the syntax to create a new class. The next thing we would have here is the constructor, which is not always compulsory to have. So you have, if you're working on what we call basically, I think it depends on if you're working on some languages, if you're working on working with patterns, sometimes they might refer to things like this as a singleton, classes that only have one instance, or probably you create only one instance and you work with that single instance. There are lots of complexity around that, but I don't want to really dive deep in there. But the idea is sometimes you don't want to have a constructor. Maybe you just want to have a static, a class with a static method that can perform a particular operation, like let's say requests. Let's assume we have requests and probably a static stuff. So you can just call employee.request, right? And within the request, to pass in whatever variable it is you're collecting here, variable. So you pass in like the variable, let's say 1, return variable. So this is a very simple class. We're not working with constructor, and we don't need to create a new instance because basically there's nothing happening here apart from just calling this method, right? And we'll talk about, I would explain why you might want to do something like this, but you can just call this, and we can say let's item equals so this is valid. If we go ahead and run this file, let's call this class file, you see we have 1, which is what we passed in, pass in user, we have user, right? So basically this is just straightforward. But when working with classes, you want to create classes that can serve as a blueprint to create multiple items. So let's follow through on what we've done here. We have a user. We don't know the kind of properties that this user is expected to have, but let's just do something random now. So I'm going to say every user should have a name, a department, and let's say place of birth, right? So let us create a constructor, and within the constructor, we're going to have name, department, and place of birth. I'm going to call that POB, and then we have this.name equals name. Why are we doing this? I'm going to explain this right now. So we have this.department equals department, and then we also have this POB equals POB. So basically, the reason why we're doing this is because we're trying to use the constructor object to construct, or to set up any new object that is being created. So given an instance that we have, John Doe be a new employee. Now the expectation is to pass in these values, right? So we have name, we have department, we have POB, and everything references the type of employee. So John Doe right now has a type of employee, as you can see, and we are trying to pass in the properties. If we don't pass in the properties, what happens if we don't pass in the properties? I'm going to execute this. So you see, we are having that, okay, John Doe is basically an employee type, but unfortunately, we don't know John Doe's name, we don't know his department, we don't know the place of birth. That's why you see we have undefined, right? So if we go ahead and put the name, let's say John Doe, we don't put the other item. So let's run this again. Now you see, we know John's name, his full name is John Doe, we don't know his department, and we don't know the place of birth. Okay, so what if we now put, let's say, engineering, right? Or let's say IT department, okay? Now we know John's name, we know the department, but we don't know the place of birth. All right, so finally, we can just say Lagos, Nigeria. And now we have all those details, right? So we are able to model, John Doe, using the employee class. We now know that, John Doe has the following details, right? These are John Doe's details. Okay, so another thing we might want to do at this point, let me check the chat if I can see any question there. Okay, so another thing we might want to do at this point is at least understand what is really happening here. Why do we have to say this.name equals name, and what is the exact reason, for doing this? Well, basically, I think one thing we should understand is that we can decide to change, the names of some of these values we have here. So like the name, department, and the rest of them. And then we're capturing whatever comes in. So we're saying the name of a new employee, if created, should be the name that we pass in within the constructor, right? So the name that we pass in within the constructor. The name of the department or the name of the employee's department should be the name that was passed in, in the constructor as well. What if we change this to, let's say, job type, job type. And the reason why I'm showing you this thing is because, okay, some people might always feel that it's just the way it is done, right? It's just the way it is done. And that is not a good way to think about these things, right? Instead, it's good to understand that, what you're doing here is basically declaring the holder or the variable, that will be used within the class, right? And we can declare the variable with another pattern, but that's basically what we're doing here. So if I hover on this, you see that this is a property. So if I call this, for example, let's see, now you see it's no longer showing department, though we have department here. That is because this is basically an argument, this is basically an argument or a parameter, whatever you call it. This is basically a parameter here that will pass in, and the value of job type in this context is going to hold whatever comes in from department, right? Can we say job type is equals job type? Would that work? Definitely, this is incorrect because we don't have job type declared here, right? So instead, what a bunch of people do to make this, to make others understand what is happening here is that sometimes they tend to do it this way, right? And I'm not saying the previous pattern is wrong, but this is also correct. Now, what we're doing here is that the real values we're going to be able to work with is name, department, and POB, but we're now assigning it to these other variables, and we're trying to differentiate to say this is the option that is coming from the value that was passed in here, right? And it has the underscore, but the main property does not have an underscore. Now, why do people prefer to do it this way at times? It's basically because when you double click on the name, you see that we have this item selected as well. Though people get to confuse this option for this option, not knowing that this is just the property, right? And this here is a parameter, and they are two different things. So that is the reason why people do it this way at times. It doesn't matter if you do it this way or the other way around. JavaScript understands what you are doing. I'm showing you this so that the person creating this would also understand what you are trying to do. Now, someone is asking, why am I using console.dir instead of console.log? dir is basically a method, that almost perform, I would say perform the same operation at times, but the difference here, this is giving us basically the same thing. I use dir most times, especially when I'm trying to log through probably an object that contains a variable that holds an object, because sometimes I would want to see, like the methods within that object. So let me see if that would work here. So Bendex, this is for you. Imagine we have print name, as a method in here, right? And I say return this dot name. Okay. So if I call print name and I'm logging this, right? So I have John Doe, and that is correct. But if I now say .dir and I print, John Doe as a whole, let's see what I have. Okay, so I still have this name. So what if I have, okay, so basically I would use dir if I really want to, get to understand more detail. I think dir is basically for, I think directory, I don't know, I can't remember the exact meaning of dir, but I use it most times to print, like, it's a method that would give me a bunch of details about a particular item or library, sometimes more than what .log would give to me. And I also tend to use .table, if I want to structure this properly. So there are multiple options that you can use from the console class. So maybe you can check that out, or from the console function. There are multiple methods you can use from that object, from the console object, sorry. Okay, so if I run this now, you see from the table is able to structure this, in this format. It doesn't really matter what you're using. At the end of the day, it's just a way to present, what you're talking about or what you're trying to show. So yeah, let's continue. So basically what I did here was I was able to add a name, a method. This is a method, right? I said a function within a class is a method, and we're able to have a method here to print name. And on this method, we're just doing something very simple, right? We're just printing out this name. And we can also decide to add parameters if we want to, right? So we can say time of day, so if we call John Doe, print, let's call this greets, and we're trying to greet based on the time of day. So if we will say if time of day is equals okay, so let's just say Tuesday, right? You can always write code to check these things, but I'm not going to do that. So instead I'm saying if time of day is equals Tuesday, right? What I want to do, we don't have Tuesday anywhere, by the way, so let's just say time of day equals Tuesday. So we're trying to check if it's equals Tuesday, which means we're checking for both the value and the type, because of course this is a string. Yeah, so let's just return this dot name, plus it's Tuesday. Remember, you can use template literals, to arrange or to structure this stuff properly. So, but this is quite simple. So we have this dot greets, right? And we have that time of day. Of course, that is correct. So let's log this instead, because we're expecting a string as a response. So John Doe, it's Tuesday. What if we have Tuesdays? So undefined. Okay, good. So yeah, you can always add else statement to make sure you don't have undefined messages in here. So basically, we have been able to create a new employee. We've been able to append the properties, and we've been able to add a method to greets, right? Just a very simple method. And you see the way we're able to do this, which means we can create multiple employees from here, right? We have John Doe. We can add Mav Doe, and we have Mav. Let's say Mav is in a food department. That is the department that Mav loves to. Yeah, so let's use like Abuja, Nigeria here. So now you're seeing we are using the same blueprint, to create multiple employees, right? So we can go ahead and call Mav Doe right here. Let's just print. Yeah, you see we have the employee, we have the name, the department, and the place of birth. Okay. So this is a very simple example of how to use a class to structure your application. Now we are trying to model an object here, in this case a human, right? An employee. But what else can we use this to model? So when you hear about the term business model, you can of course use this to model your business process. Like we have an employee is trying to log in create an account and perform those kind of operations. So we can use this to quickly prototype something. So let's say an employee or a user, I'm going to change this now, or probably I will share this code with you. So let me leave it this way. So let's say we have a user model. Yes, here's another quick example. So we have a user right here with the constructor of username and password. What I tried to show you the other time. So I'm going to take this off. I'm going to take this off. You know what I'm trying to do, right? So I have username right here. Okay. We have password. Okay. Same thing here. And then we have login. Right, without any, let's assume, we don't have anything coming from here. So we also have logouts. Okay, so within the logouts method, we're going to say just return. So let's pass in one thing here, which I'm going to create a variable here. So I'm going to say let's log in status. All right, we don't need so yeah. So this is just, we have a property here called login status, right? And by default, let's call this, let's just say false, So let's say login status is false by default. And when the user logs in, we're going to say this dot login status, we're going to change this to login status equals true, right? And before we make this true, we're simply going to say if this dot user name or in order not to have a complex a long code, we can just say let's name id equals this dot username, and I'm sure you know what we're going to have in the username, right? The username that was passed in here when you created a new user would automatically become the ID here. And let's call this let hashed password equals this dot password. We are not hashing anything here, but we're just trying to use this as an example. So if ID equals John Doe, and can we do this? Yeah. So let's say and hashed password is equals. Now, if you have any question as regards, why I'm using the, I'm sure you know what I'm doing here. Basically, we're comparing this to ensure it has both the value and the property and the data type and the same data type. So hash password is equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we're saying, yeah. So do this for us, right? Else, tell us that. So return. So let's say return login was successful. I believe you get what I'm trying to do. Else login details are incorrect. Yeah. Okay. So of course this is just then we have logout. Logout to basically change this dot login status or status. So, I mean, doesn't matter. Equals false, and now we're going to return we've logged you out, right? All right, nice. So we have a very simple. Let me try to reduce this so we can. I hope this is not too small. I hope you can see this well. So we've been able to create a very simple, a very simple class. We pass in our details, we put in the username, the password. Then we go ahead and log in, and we can also log out. All right, so let's test this now. So we're going to create a new user, and our user is going to give us their details. Their details. So we have the username and password. So let's just say the username here, in this case, is going to be similar to what we have here, basically because we are just comparing this directly as strings, right? So username and password is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So this is John Doe, and John Doe wants to log in, right? So John Doe is going to log in. So if John Doe, if we do John Doe.login, so let's say login results. So we're going to check the login results, right? So let's console.log. If John Doe has logged in and we want to see the login results, what do we get? I think I'm running a different file, so I have to do user model. So you see, login was successful. Let's assume that this item is wrong, right? And we'll try to log in. Login details are incorrect. Do you understand this? And then if we now say we want to log out, or let's also go ahead and test something. After logging in, let's just say console.log, and we have, I'm going to simply call, okay, so let's see. I'm going to simply call johndoe.login status, and I doubt if, yeah, let's do this. So, okay, incorrect. So we have false, right? Okay, so let's take it back to 5. And yeah, so now login was successful, and we're checking the login status, which is this, and now it is true, right? It is true because the login was successful and it was changed. Okay, so let's try to log out. After checking the login status, let us put some text here to make this more presentable. So login status, and I am simply going to do this. All right. Okay. So all right. So this is the login message we get. So let's call this login message. Okay. And right here we're going to put. So I'm sure you know what I'm doing here. If you don't understand what we're doing here, ask a question, please, in the chat. Everybody, I want to make sure everybody is following along. So basically, we created a new user. Let's comment. We create a new user right here. The second line, try or we log the user in. Okay, and next, we print out the login results, which is going to tell us if it's successful or if the login credentials are incorrect. And finally, we check the login status. Okay, sorry for my mistakes. So we check the login status, and then what we'll do after this is to log out, right? So log the user out. Okay, so now we have this very simple class. We're able to create a new account right here, from the constructor, then we're able to log in, we're able to log out. All right, so if we run this, you see, we're able to log the user in, login message, login was successful. The status was true, and then this is supposed to be logout. So sorry, I was supposed to have logout status, logout status. And to log out, we're simply going to do the John Doe log out, right? We're trying to log out, and this would print the logout status. Okay, so print the login status after logging out, right? After logging out, we want to print the login status. Remember that this should be inside console.log, because we want that, we're returning something which is a message. We want that message to show very well. Okay, so yeah, so right here we're going to log the user out to show us that message. And after logging the user out, we still want to see the login status to know if it's false or true, because by default when you log out, it's supposed to be false, right? So logout status, we're going to call that status again. Is this correct? Yeah, let's run this. So we have login message, login was successful, login status true, right? Then when we logged out, logout message, it says we have logged you out, and then the logout status false. This was supposed to be login status. Yeah, so that was supposed to be login status. Okay, so login status false, which means we have successfully created a very simple, user object that can perform login and logout operation. So this is looking, in case you think this is very tedious and there's something you still don't understand from my explanation, ask your question please in the chat. Let me answer that before I move on to the next thing. I would love to show you. I just want you to understand that we have the methods. The methods can contain arguments. If you want to add, you call that parameters, right? So it can contain those parameters. When you are calling it and you put in something in there, that's when you can refer to that as arguments. But for now, these are parameters. If you want to have parameters in here, yeah. So I think that is this is how you create your your class variables. Basically, we're creating variables in here, and you can create. So all these items can basically be variables, right? Even if you don't have any value in the inside for now, it can be null or yeah, it can be null. So basically, you see, you can create it this way, but it's not a compulsory thing that you must do. Doing that is not a bad idea, right? There's nothing wrong with doing it this way, but it's not compulsory, and that's what I want you to understand. Okay, so do you have any question? Do you have any question before I proceed? You know, the chat is open. Drop your questions. Let's check what type of objects is John Doe. We can just simply say console.log and we say type of John Doe, right? So let's see if we print this. You see that John Doe, of course, is an object, right? John Doe is an object. What if we say we want to check the type of, you know, the user object itself? You know, of course, we're getting a function, and we're getting a function. This is expected basically because the user itself, you know, as an object, you know, is also an instance of so in JavaScript, basically everything is a function. I've said this, you know, countless times. In JavaScript, everything is a function, and you know, even the object itself, you know, on the ground level, you know, is being created, you know, from before. That's why we have what we call the function constructor, which basically creates that object for you. So this is actually expected. In case you see this, you know, some of you might be expecting that, you know, when you put in John Doe should give us, you know, the type of a class, right? Probably that's what you're expecting. You know, even a class in itself is an object. Okay. All right, and to also verify, you know, by pointing on this, you see this is a property, and of course, properties are, you know, part of the objects of, part of the object. Okay, so I believe you understand me because I can't see any question in the chats. I can't see any question in the chat, and apart from that, we really have few people, you know, learning from this session. So the backend guys are not active and they're not on this call. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. So looking at our item here, you know, the next thing we should be looking at is inheritance, right? Well, before we talk about inheritance, let me first off make sure you understand static methods. That will be faster for us to really run through. So what is a static method? I was able to show you an example. I'm going to create another one. So I'm going to create another one. I'm going to call this static method.js. So I'm going to bring back this same user model. I'm going to put it inside the static method. Let's take these items off. So we still have that class, right? And you know, we have the login, logout operation. So a static method basically is a method that you can call without having to really create, like, you know, a new instance of the object. So we have a static method, and we're going to call a static method of check login status, right? Check login status, and this is going to return this login status. So now, do we really need to create this a new instance before we, or a new object? So we don't necessarily need to. We can just call user.check login status, and we can just call this login status with a let statement, and we can console.log login status. Okay. So by default, of course, I'm currently running the wrong file again. So this should be static methods. So okay, now we're getting undefined. We're getting undefined because you know, we're basically, you know, we call this static you know, get check login status. We are returning this login status you know, from here. Let's assume, you know, let's just assume we have something here we call name equals hello, right? And yeah, equals hello, and you know, we are returning name. Let's see what will happen if we still get the undefined or not. So I'm calling this right now, and I'm passing it into this place. So you see we have hello, and this is to tell you that you know, you can work with static methods, you know, without having to really create a new instance, you know, like doing the new user thing, right? So this would work. The only problem right now is that you know, you would not be able to use the this because basically we don't know what this is trying to reference, because we don't have an object. You know, we don't have an object. So if you created an object, for example, new user, then this becomes you know, when you call this, is going to reference, you know, the login status itself, and yeah, it's going to reference. So if I do okay, yeah, I think we already have that check stuff there. So let's go back. Now this is giving us an error. Basically, this is giving us an error because we did not, you know, put in the constructor. You know, you need to have a constructor, right, where you put in the name and password, right? We're not doing that here, and that is why we're having that error. So it's telling us that this check login status, it's not a constructor. So although we had that error. Okay, so but you get the point. You can create a static method, just like this, and use the static method for your own custom operation. You don't want methods or functions to be scattered around different files. You group them in one class and you make this item static so that you can easily call the class, to say, perform this operation for me. I don't really need to create a new instance of that particular object. Now, where does this come in handy? Personally, I use this when building. A lot of people call it, in different ways. I call it facade. Some people call it facade. Some people call it facade, right? And we call it facade is basically, you're trying to create like an exterior view of your functionality. So let's assume I have a class and I call this class requests, right? I use this a lot when working on. So I'm trying to. I have a library for making requests. I want to always use this library to call something, right? And I say call. Just an example. I say call call request. Call request. Okay. So I call this call request, and this is a function to always give me something. So when I request with a parameter. So we're expecting a parameter, and we're going to return. We're going to return something like this. This is your parameter, okay? And the parameter would, of course, parameter. Okay, so I can always call request.call request, and what is my request here? I want to request backend engineering. Okay, so when I call it this way, this is going to be returned, right? So let's just say we have let's request value equals this, and I can console.log request value. So I was able to create a very simple class that I can use to abstract some things. So I know that I have this functionality inside the request, and this is for call request. I can also have get requests. Sorry, that was a mistake. Get requests. So when I also go ahead to call get requests, I call this new request value. Okay. Okay, so if I go ahead and do this, so in our new request value front end, so you see we're able to call this from this we have a structure to hold all these methods and they are grouped together using the class. So we can have this, and then when I try to print this. Okay, so we have an error, and that is saying call request is not. Oh yeah, so it's not because we forgot to add the static. Okay, yeah. Oh, sorry about that. We forgot to add the static. So if I run this now, you see this is your parameter, backend engineering, and yeah, so we're able to put in the static methods to perform specific operations, but we want these operations to be grouped inside a class. And this would even help you when you now start extending the functionality of this class using what we call inheritance. And yeah, so I'm just going to call this example 2. I'm going to leave this as example 1, right? Okay, so I think this leads us to the question right now: what is inheritance? So inheritance.js. Okay, all right. So basically, I think what you should understand about inheritance is simply you're trying to create a class that can be used, or that you can extend, right? That you can extend you want to extend the functionality of that class to other classes, right? And you are able to also pick some of the properties of the parent class, using a very simple command, called super. I'm going to show you an example right now. So let's assume that we have two pets. We have a dog, we have a cat. Now, of course, they are both animals. We have some methods, like walk, right? We have fly. Let's assume we also have a dog. Okay. All right. So we have these pets. I'm going to call these pets, right? That's what they are. So we have pets, and these are the pets we have. Let's put these items an array like this. So we have a dog, a cat, and a pet. Now, some of these animals can walk, can fly, can swim, right? So we want to be able to, put these functionalities, the basic functionalities, the base functionalities, which is walk, right? All these pets can, yeah, so that was a mistake, a duck, okay? So these pets can actually, yeah, they can walk, one of them can fly and swim. I don't know if the others can fly or swim. I don't have any of them, but let's go ahead and create the base class. So the base class, I'm going to call this pets, right? And one of the main functionality, let's assume we're able to use this to create, the constructor. So let's say we have the constructor in here, and yeah, so basically what we expect, all the pets to have is maybe a name, the pets, let's call it the pet type, the pet type. I don't know, or let's call it the legs, how many legs do they have? And let's just say owner as well, right? So let's just say owner. These are probably the wrong, the worst type of parameters to have. Okay, so I'm simply going to say this, that name equals name, right? And of course, remember, you can always put this, the name, the legs, and then owner, but not compulsory to have them. So this dot name equals name, this dot legs equals legs, and then we have this dot owner equals owner, right? So now this is to say, if I go ahead to create a new pet, for example, cat equals a new pet, and I put in these details, I mean, it would work as expected. But the thing now is we want to have another class for cats, specific to cats, and they should be able to, cats, cats should be able to, I don't know. I'm going to assume that cats can dance, this is weird, but yeah. So let's just say cats should be able to dance. But, at the same time, cats can walk. And, you don't want to start creating, the walk method everywhere. You don't want to create the walk. Let's just return the pet is walking. So I'm going to say use.name, which is the name of the pet, can walk, right? Can walk. And we're going to put this inside the template literal, just like this. Right, so the pet can walk. Yeah, but we don't want to put like swim and fly, because of course not all the pets that we have on our list can swim or fly. So what I'm going to do instead is let's work with two pets. I don't want to say cats dance, so let's work with dog and duck, right? So now we're going to have a new class for dog, right? And what we expect to grab from here is some of the properties, for example, the constructor. So we're going to extend, this is where you extend pets, right? And basically, because the dog itself is a pet, so by extending pets, every functionality you have here, the dog has that functionality automatically, right? Automatically. So the dog can walk as well, right? The dog can walk as well. I don't know if dogs run, but I'm going to use run as a case study as well here. So let's say the dogs run. Of course, the dogs run. So we're going to add the run just like this. And one thing that you would definitely you might need to do is to while performing inheritance using this extend is I mentioned earlier, I said super, right? And basically when you have the constructor in here for the dog, what you can do is, of course, this should also have all the details. So right, just like this. The reason why you want to the reason why we're having a constructor in here is because you might want to add more properties, right, to the dog. So let's say okay, let's say, I don't know, probably, yeah, some other properties you might want to have, like smile. Dog smile. I think I've seen some funny pictures where dogs smile. So we have this the smile equals smile, right? Which is weird, but that's fine. So then we can now have super, and we can use this to grab the name. What else do we have there? The legs, right? And also the owner, which means we're going to grab whenever we create a new constructor, we expect the items here to remain the same. And then we have run, right? So let's return, and let's say this.name, which is of course the dog's name, can run, right? So you see that we don't have to repeat walk because we are trying to use the functionality we have here. The dog can walk, the dog can walk at the same time. So now we've been able to extend the functionality of walk. So automatically when we create a new dog, if we say let's Kelvin, do we have anybody bearing Kelvin here? Nope. Okay, so let's say Kelvin, which I don't know, but I think it can. Okay, let's do bingo, right? Equals new dog, right? And what are the properties expected? You see, we expect all these properties. We inherited these properties from the superclass, right? And this is the child class in this case because we are calling the superclass. So basically, it has a name, and the name is bingo. It has legs, and we just say two. It has an owner. We're going to say John Doe, right? And smile. Let's do true, right? So if we decide to just tell the console.log bingo. All right, let's see what we have. We are also calling the wrong document again. So I'm going to say inheritance. All right, so we have an error here, and it says work is not defined. So let's see. Of course, this item should be commented out. Sorry about that. So let's run this again. So you see, we have a new dog. We have a dog with all these properties, right? And then, oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, yeah, 4 legs. Thank you. Okay, so we have 4 legs, and we can also say console.log bingo dot. You see, we can say dot run, right? We can say dot run, and we can also say dot walk, right? So if we run this again, you see the bingo can run, the bingo can walk. So even if we did not define walk in here, we've extended this from this part already. And yeah, so let's also create another pets. We're going to create a doc this time. So doc extends pets. Okay. So we're going to have a constructor as well, and it's going to be similar to this. So let's just pick this from here, and we take off the smile. We don't want that. Okay. And we then call, let's say we add swim, right? So we had swim. Okay. So we return this and swim. Okay. Yeah. So what we are able to see here is we're able to create some new set of items. I'm going to call this ducky. So ducky has 2 legs. It's owned by Mary Doe, and smile. I don't know. Let's say false. So we have ducky right here. So first off, the ducky cannot run because we don't have run in here. If we try to run this, we are definitely going to see. So it says ducky can run. That is because what are we extending? Let's verify this, please. So I said duck extend pets, and we have the swim. Okay. So yeah, we have dog here, so that's a mistake. Okay. So let's call duck. All right. So let's do this again. Now you see a ducky.run is not a function because yeah, the doc does not have the run function in here. So instead it has the swim the method, sorry. So we have the swim method, right? So someone is asking, can the child class inherit from another child's class? So for example, can the dog class inherit from the dog class? Okay, so I'm trying to get your question. So what you mean is now we have dog. Can we inherit from dog? Bendex, you're the one asking that question, right? So Bendex, if that's what you mean, remember that this is also a class in itself, right? So basically, you can create any other class that would extend this, right? And yeah, that's correct. That would work. You can create any other class that would extend this, which means when you're calling the super, you are basically calling this super and no longer this super. So if this particular super item is not really available for use, then you might run into a problem. So you have to be careful, the kind of parent class you're using. But yes, you can actually inherit from that. Yeah, of course, yeah, you can. So do you have any other question, please, before we proceed? We are already, okay. So I was not looking at the time. So I've explained some of these items. We still have to talk about private fields. We still have to talk about, private methods, getters and setters. Unfortunately, I wanted to make sure that the class was very detailed, but we have exhausted our time. So this will be all. I will discuss with the team, to arrange for a different session so we can finish up with this and then talk about some of the things we still have on that, on our list. We still need to talk about Node, NPM, MDM, and then APIs. Unfortunately, we won't be able to continue right now. We would have a different session probably tomorrow or next. I would discuss to see how we can arrange for that if it's possible, and I will let you know. Invite a friend so we can really learn together and then dive into building real applications using Node.js and JavaScript. So I believe I believe you had a very wonderful time. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Okay. All right, so I think we can end the call already, and we can stop the recording. Thank you. This recording will be shared with you, of course. So bye.